Bom dia, esse é o 5º webinário sobre o Real Digital. Hoje o foco vai ser emissão e movimentação do Real Digital. Esse evento faz parte de uma série de webinários que o Banco Central está promovendo para debater junto à sociedade as diretrizes publicadas sobre o Real Digital e também para levantar casos de uso e tecnologias aplicáveis aos usos propostos. Lembro que os 4 eventos anteriores da série, realizados até agora, estão disponíveis no canal do Banco Central no YouTube, tanto em português quanto em inglês. O evento de hoje, assim como os próximos, será transmitido simultaneamente nas 2 línguas e também vai ficar disponível no YouTube. Meu nome é Rogério Luca, sou chefe do Departamento de Operações Bancárias e de Sistema de Pagamentos do Banco Central do Brasil e vou ser o moderador do evento de hoje. Antes de apresentar e passar para as considerações iniciais dos nossos convidados de hoje, gostaria de apresentar o contexto de nossa conversa. O mercado financeiro vem passando por rápidas mudanças no mundo todo. O Brasil já andou um longo caminho nessa direção. Desde 2013, temos uma previsão legal clara para a prestação de serviços de pagamentos por instituições não financeiras. Desde 2018, temos fintechs de crédito regulamentadas. Com menos de um ano de vida, o Pix é um estrondoso sucesso e continua crescendo exponencialmente. Esse ano, definimos o ecossistema do Open Banking brasileiro e já começamos sua implementação. Nas próximas semanas, devemos divulgar o resultado da seleção do primeiro ciclo do nosso sandbox regulatório. Ao longo de todas essas evoluções, as infraestruturas do mercado financeiro, tanto aquelas operadas pelo Banco Central quanto as privadas, continuaram evoluindo e suportando essas mudanças.
Giving support to the change. These changes were very relevant over the last few years to increase efficiency and security in Brazilian payment system. Digitalization of payment means and service providers, the increase in competition in payment services and development of new businesses, models, and new data to help part of the population which was not assisted. Market keeps on evolving. Recently, we've seen many movements in the sense of, first, financial intermediation, growth of capital markets, financing the economy, initiatives to distribute credit initiatives in many ways. We've also seen verticalization of payment services providers and financial services towards outside the financial market, offering payment services and financial services integrated with other services in the data analysis marketplace. And lastly, an exponential growth of information and technology use and offer of the financial services and payment services. This recent evolution has huge potential to increase efficiency in service providers and payment services. Potentially, it demands evolution of the infrastructures of the financial market to adapt to larger decentralization of service offer and better use of information. On the other hand, they can bring risk in what regards monetary stabilization and financial stability in market concentration. This has been the basic scenario in which most of central banks around the world have discussed implementations of their digital coins, CBDCs, as basic infrastructure that would support development of the financial services by the participants of the market and keeping at the same time monetary stabilization, financial stabilization, and the market competitive. It's in this context that today's webinar, issue and movement of digital, how digital will be in the center of the debate. We'll discuss strategies for creation, distribution, custody, and distribution of digital health, seeking to understand how this new tool will affect financial intermediation and assess the impacts on the system. For today's event, we have the presence of 3 great professionals who will share their points of view on the theme and who will also answer to the audience's questions. Questions must be sent to the email real.digital@bcb.gov.br, and to the extent that's possible, they will be addressed to the table. Now I pass on to our guests for their initial considerations. Our first guest is Leandro Lille. Leandro is engineer by UFRJ and in 30 years in the financial sector, has experiences in corporate banking, internal banking, and financial products. Since 2013, he is Director for Innovation and Products and Services of Febraban. Participates also on the team that's studying the implications of CBDC in Brazil. Good morning, welcome Leandro. I pass the floor to you for your initial considerations. Rogério, thank you very much. First of all, I feel extremely honored. Febraban is extremely honored to be amidst highly trained professionals to discuss the issue of digital real. Digital real, I think, doubtlessly is a meaningful step for Brazilian and world economy to the extent that CBDC has been being discussed in other geographies, other environments, and that can provide a larger efficiency for the whole economy and for the banking sector as a whole itself. From the consumer's point of view, the client's point of view, the application of digital real can have many implications. We will discuss this along the seminar. I don't want to kill all questions before due time, but without any shadow of a doubt, we see that CBDC has a diversity that's very large for applications, different applications for different problems that each economy can have. Febraban is totally engaged in the project, and we have already established a working group to be able to assess effectively which would be the recommendations, and I'm sure it will be a very technical, very rich debate to all the participants. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leandro. I pass on to our next guest, Bruno Magan. He is Director of Institutional Relations of Eurobanking and President of ZETA. ZETA is an association that represents companies, tech companies and financial sector. Bruno also performed as Institutional Relations Director in Facebook and researcher at FGV. He graduated in law by UFRJ and his master's in technology and innovation by Harvard School. Good morning, Bruno. Welcome. I pass the floor on to you for initial considerations. Good morning, Rogério. Good morning, Leandro. Good morning, Marcio. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to say that it's an honor to me also to participate in this event, to be able to contribute with the debate together with the central bank and the industry and the academia on such a relevant subject as the digital real. So I think that in terms of initial considerations, I think that what I wanted to say has to do with this. So we are witnessing all action around crypto actives. We are seeing a moment that seems very relevant not only with technology but also the finance world. The other day I was talking to some people, and the impression that we have on the moment we are going through, looking to all innovation of the crypto actives, is that we are once again in 1999 or the 2000 years, where we see the commercial internet ascending and the elaboration and consolidations of one of the first business models of tech companies. Maybe the moment would be even previous to this. We are talking about institutional issues or financial infrastructure that will allow innovation in the future. We are here as banking, but as also ZETA, and one of the things we look towards in the association is how technology has been used, and we see this in the internet in a general manner as an innovation force. To use the Schumpeter concept, it does this creative destructions. These business models end up not working. Others open space for other business models and to develop. And so we see this movement happening between technology, where it brings innovations in different sectors, and with, I think that what we're looking towards now with the crypto actives and this in a general manner can be one of these moments. And the question that remains, also not wanting to anticipate the questions, is what it means to us who are in the financial sector. Would it be that the decentralized finance will be this creative destruction wave that will affect the banking systems, or would it be that the financial sector, the financial system in a general manner will be able to absorb this innovation wave and reinvent itself to keep on maintaining itself in a relevant role that the financial system had up to date. So I think this is one of the questions we'll try to answer here as the event goes on. So let's leave it for the questions and we come back to this issue. Thank you, Bruno. Let's call to the stage, let's call our third guest, Professor Márcio Garcia. He's a full professor at the PUC-Rio Economics Department since 1991. He's performed the chief position and coordination of graduation and postgrad. He has PhD in economics by Stanford University, and the research areas are international finance and economic finance. He's been a teacher at Stanford and MIT economics departments and at the Université de Val-de-Saône in France. He's associated researcher at CNPq and FAPERJ and member of Palladium Group. He's an advisor of international and Brazilian institutions as World Bank, IDB, P3, World Bank, and Icatu, Ambima, Neo Investments, Fininvest, amongst others, and since 2019 is a member of the Administration Council of Banrisul. Good morning, Márcio. Welcome. I open the floor for your initial considerations. Good morning. Thank you very much to the Central Bank for the invitation to participate. I see myself like a ghost. Is that correct? Is that how I'm appearing? Yes, you are blinking a little bit. Let me take this this background picture. It's beautiful, it's real, but let me remove it so I stop blinking. It's still, yes, it's still blinking. So sorry, I will change my camera. Okay, sorry for the flaw. Let me see how I do this.
Hello?
Hello? Yes, now it seems to be working. Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Hi. We
Tá
don't have your image. Sorry. Oh, now we have your image. I apologize. Maybe it would be a tip, given that our subject is digital health, that involves obviously technology. So this is a reminder that new technologies, even being tested, and we did test it, was working well, they can bring ungrateful surprises. So I was saying that thank you very much to the Central Bank for the invitation. I am not a specialist in digital coins, digital currencies, and I understood the invitation as a challenge to learn something about the subject and to have interesting things to say today. I think I learned a lot. I think I will begin by the least important, which is the formal issue. I like our language very much, Portuguese. It's always invaded by English expressions, so I want to propose that instead of CBDC, we start using MDBC, Moeda Digital do Banco Central, which is the Portuguese for central bank digital currency. The ones who were my students know I do this a lot, but let's go on. I think it's a challenge, a huge challenge. I think the central bank is acting pretty well in face of the challenges placed, and the seminar shows this. And I think that In the Brazilian case, what's different maybe regarding the other countries in the world is that we have this innovation, this fantastic innovation of PIX, which was mentioned already, and that brings or brought to us and to dozens of millions of Brazilians who hadn't done any digital transactions. The other day in an international seminar from the International Compensation Bank quoted that 40 million Brazilians for the first time did digital transactions were using PIX. So that's magnificent, that's incredible. And the issue is what else a CBDC can add to what is already in PIX and what will still go into PIX, because PIX still has many other features to be added.
And how this fits the other initiatives of the central bank, as it was already mentioned by Rogério, as the open banking or the open finance. So this is fundamental because PIX has a noticeable, very remarkable response, and it had also other surprises that we didn't notice before, which any technology can bring to us. We always have to be fast, and we always need to be careful, and we know that very well. So I'm going to wait for the questions. Thank you very much, Márcio. Although the technology may bring risks, we can always adapt to it. And Márcio has told us a little bit about this. Thank you. So now I'm going to start a Q&A session in our round table here, reminding that the audience can also ask questions and digitalworldbcb.com.br. And let's start with Leandro as a representative of Febraban, who represents the traditional financial system. Let me ask you something, Leandro. The funding, the traditional funding, and the deposit is a funding source where the institutions they don't pay any invoice or anything like that. So in this model, this is already being contested, and some of the evolutions that we can see here in the beginning of the conversation is the possibility of having institutions that are non-financial and have a payment bill, and the use of this resource of different types of payment is very useful. These new models, they are creating new ways of payment, and they bring other types of model without having the demand deposit that can show a very resilient and adaptable model that incorporates different changes, and they show efficiency in a way of being more and more safe when this scenario that is changing so much. Considering the digital real as a custody of a resource without remuneration, how do you see this as something that the central bank can capture? And knowing the different risks that we can face with this and that can be expected in this intermediation. The central bank and its guidelines has already incorporated some controls, and the world around us have already started discussing all of these different changes that can take place. And the world as a whole, the different central banks, they are discussing this, different ways of controlling this, and the distribution being intermediated, just like the central bank and Banco do Brasil have already discussed, and the use of different parameters. So This type of control can it mitigate this impact and also allow a entry that is a little smoother in this interconnection? Very good question, Luca. First of all, we need to analyze this in different points of view. In a systemic point of view, first of all, of course, that the deposits at site and on demand, I hope that they are very successful more and more with the digital money and the digital currency, and that is why so many people are studying this. We understand that the digital currency in a systemic manner, what are its implications? I'm going to give you an example. In the deposits at site, nowadays you have a obligatoriness of having one part of it being taken by the different areas of the bank, and they are collected to different areas, and some percentages that go to the agriculture, to the agribusiness, and different areas. So we need to know how this is going to be directed, and these obligations that we need to face inside the bank, the central bank, shouldn't impact these different areas of deposits with these different percentages. I'm not saying that the compulsory type of distribution is wrong, because it is necessary, but they are very elevated. They are more elevated than in different parts of the world in general, and this can bring some implications indeed in the direction of these collections and their obligations, and some areas are going to be less used than the other ones. And I have already talked about this with different areas. There can be shortages in some areas, and the client can also have an impact in the migration of these resources. Not only we can have a digital currency in the bank for this client, but the client needs to find value in this initiative. And my question here is, what is the advantage, and why would he use part of his resources to this digital currency? And here is where I think it's going to be an enormous challenge that we're going to have in the different technologies. I think that this is really relevant. The type of communication that we can have and the way that we can create different products and alternatives to the final consumer, where he can use his resources for that. He needs to know why he's doing that and what are the implications and benefits that he's going to have with it. He's not going to migrate from a traditional product to a innovative product without knowing the different areas that it's going to impact his life. We know that the digital currency, if we identify the different advantages for this client and tangible changes for his to his life, it's going to be really good for the entire population. We have observed in the last 10 years that it has a very positive aspect. If we have this enormous challenge of communication with all of them, we can also show the tangible benefits. And on the other side, Rogério, I think that the Brazilians, they have a characteristic that I find very fantastic. Although we have many difficulties of infrastructure, of income, of smartphone, of pretension, so many things, and we know the profile of our population. The Brazilian in general is a person that adopts technology in a very fast manner and also in a very effective manner. So just to give you a number, just last year in 2020, so even before PIX, because it entered in November 2020. At the end of the year, 67% of the transactions were occurring on the internet or mobile, and this is a number that is gigantic if you compare it with other geographies. So the Brazilians really adopt technology in a very fast manner. And Pix, at less than 1 year, 10 months after Pix was launched, we already had more than 50 million people doing this type of transaction. So we are a very we are fast adopters of technology, and this is a very short term effect. We need to understand the benefits, and he needs to know exactly what he's doing to adopt that in his daily life. I hope that I have answered both of your points of view that you have asked about regarding the digital currency, both on the bank side and the consumer side. Yes, I really enjoyed that, and you have even made me think about the next question, in the sense that in this speech that you have already provided here, Leandro, we can deny the advance that we have had in Brazil in terms of evolution throughout the time. Márcio has already talked about this. I have already talked about this, and Leandro as well. It's very clear to me that in this digitalization of payments and of offering of services in general, we have really seen a change. The agenda is really well balanced, and we can see that. Márcio has mentioned a few numbers here, and new people entering the market. It seems that in the point of view of the competence and the different people that are in the market, I really like the point that Leandro has raised. You have become a representative of the different technology companies that provide this service. And I really like this. What is these different crypto actives that you have mentioned? And you have already talked about this. So what is the role that you can see in the different business based in this very smart technology and platform that can show decentralized information? How do you see this working throughout the time, and the type of service that you see being aggregated throughout the time? How can this work in an intelligent platform to improve the functioning of the economy? And once again, I'm going to go back to Márcio, and Márcio has used another Anglo term here. We have already talked about the decentralized finances, DeFi, and how do you see all of these evolutions that have been made in the market? DeFi. How do you see this being included in the regulatory threshold and included in a smart platform that could be used with a CBDC? That is an excellent question, Rogério. In the first part, I agree with you that in a way, with the fast acceleration of the digital currency and with PIX, we have a solution that is very good, and that is what we already provide to our consumers. So this shows that do we really need digital real or something like that? What do we gain with this implementation? And before entering in the digital real and the future of the decentralized finance, before that, I would like to talk about the intermediation and the potential disintermediation of the financial system through the different payments and models of the fintechs. So what we have already observed here is that with the creation of the accounts that are attached to the different models of income and that are noticed by the different institutions with remuneration of the treasury, and the possibility of transactions that are electronically made, providing credit or debit and PIX, has already solved many of the challenges of transactions that we've had. And at the same time, I think that it hasn't solved all of the needs of the client in the point of view of investments. Of course, that having an option such as this that I have mentioned here, where you can leave your resource there and receive through the payment automatically, is already something that Selic has already provided before. It's very important to all of these institutions and to the acquisition of clients, but it's not going to be enough to maintain these clients in these platforms. These clients, they have a variety of necessities, and they need more and more investments and solutions for their financial projects, including a more personalized type of service. And I think that the financial system is going to integrate that to the clients.
I don't see a risk for disintermediation, even because, once again, for the most, this model my of payment accounts, 100% of CDI might have been well succeeded, but many institutions have explored the use of these resources, be term depositors, the use of these resources for financing, also to attend to other needs of clients as a role of financial intermediations that can't be done by the payment institutions, but can be done by other figures that are in the national financial system. So, having said that, which is would be the role of digital real then for the new business models for technology? If we have already been seeing, I think, an important impact of the fintechs in the financial sector. I think we have the role to assure interoperability between the traditional financial systems and these new decentralized finance platforms. And here I mentioned crypto actives. I alluded to this to them to talk about the use, the ongoing number of people using crypto actives as a way to invest resources, anyhow, to be able to have access to other options of financial options of this decentralized finance world, but it's difficult to make the connection with the traditional finance system. We see in the crypto active world the appearance of the, once again, sorry to Marcio for using the English term, but the stable coins, which are crypto actives or digital currencies that have parity with coins in the real world or currencies in the real world. There's differences to real, dollar, euro, other currencies that are used exactly to make this interface with the possibilities that technology has been providing for the crypto active world. I think the central bank has a unique opportunity of not ignoring this whole movement that's going on of the decentralized financial institutions, but on the other hand, to open itself and interact with this world and take to this world, I think, assurances and things that are important for people who have been using these technologies nowadays. Which are these technologies? Why would we like to allow this interoperability. I think the last webinar of the central bank, I think, was focused on intelligent contracts, and I think intelligent contracts are, or smart contracts are, one of the tools that can allow the appearance of innovative, more agile business models, and with a huge transformation potential for society. We already see, for example, the decentralized finance system somehow trying to mimetize operations of the finance system of payments and interests in an automatic manner, or smart contracts that use resources as assurances that are also automatic. This just to mention some that are closer to what we see in the current financial system, but there are others that I think that are the very beginning, but that have interesting potential. For example, when we think on the so-called oracle technologies, there are layers that work in the cryptoactive world that allow integration with elements of the physical world, so you can obtain information of the physical world, and based on this information, close contracts or do operation using these information. So let's imagine here that we would have a system that somehow would provide a public record also for real estate, digital, accessible by everyone. A record like this could be integrated in a smart contract to have operations for loans with these assurances. Of course, there are problems for this, talking in an abstract manner. The problem of how to assess these guarantees, not allow that some of the past mistakes would happen. I think that the potentials that technology will allow, actually we're looking to the tip of the iceberg. We're talking here about the construction of the infrastructures that will allow for the evolution of the financial systems, of the financial operations, and the amplification or increase of the operations with a larger public, with more integration, not only with the decentralized finances, but also with other elements of the real world. Just to mention some and not to go too far into the subject. Thank you. It was very clarifying. The answer you provided was very clarifying. Pass on to the first question to Marcio on how, as you declared yourself not a big specialist in CBDC, let's explore and take advantage of his presence. And I'll ask a more general question to Marcio, something we discuss when the central banks deal with the issue of the potential emission of a digital currency, a digital coin, is the conversibility, the potential way to convert and different prices, even if the central bank should in a last spot assure parity of 1-to-1 between the digital currency, which is the digital currency, to the physical currencies, even with the differentiation that Bruno mentioned, if that potentially would be able to generate a different market value, even with the central bank assuring conversibility. It's potentially, if that could generate a differentiation in price between the traditional real and the digital real on part of the central bank. How do you see this? Do you think if the central bank or the central banks in a general manner would go into the emission of a digital currency, would there be a risk that the central bank itself would work with two currencies with different names, and that there would be a conversion in the market? Something else I mentioned when I talked to Leandro, something we generally discuss, is the establishment of limits. As I limit and try to avoid the differentiation, would I have a demand to justify a different price between digital real and the bank reserve of the central bank? How do you see the possibility? Do you think this might exist? Do you think this will exist? Do you think this won't exist anyhow? In case this comes to existence, how do you see potentially this issue of the central bank assuring this difference? You can have currencies with different values in the market. How do you see this? Thank you for the question. Before answering, although I will make some considerations on the two previous questions, and the answers were magnificent, incredible. I will begin by what Bruno mentioned. When he answered to the question he made himself about which innovation the digital real would, the CBDC, sorry, now I broke my own rule, CBDC, Brazilian CBDC would bring in relation to what exists in PIX, he mentioned above all to assure interoperability between the many platforms. But CBDC is an account that each one of us would have in a passive in the central bank. Central bank has such an account, but with CBDC we would all have an account like this. This would be the main feature. This main feature he didn't mention. And why didn't he mention it? Probably because he doesn't think it would be relevant. Why? Because nowadays what you have nowadays is your ability to pass from deposits, effective deposits, investments, and it was exactly the investments he highlighted as being fundamental. Leandro highlighted another thing. He highlighted that today you have a whole structure set over the effective deposits. Okay, there are the ones who defend that in theory you would end effective deposits. You only have CBDC, have your account for payments with the central bank, and the other thing becomes another animal, someone who will have long term debts. This will be, and you will use this money to take your loans, make your applications, but you will remove from what is known as a bank today to the effective deposits, or what's correspondent, and the structure we know as a narrow bank, more or less, is what you have nowadays for the payment institutions, as Bruno referred to. So these two answers provide a clear message. First, CBDC is not anyhow, or doesn't seem to be a priority because of its feature of providing access to the central bank's passive, something we see perfectly. And second, if we opt for a change, if we choose to change, we'll have to be very careful in doing this, because we'll change many things that along years constituted on top of built on top of the structure we have today. It's not such a simple thing. So finally, let's move to your question. First, when you use this conversibility expression, just to clarify to our listeners, you're not using the expression in the sense that we use in international finance of exchange with international currencies. First, has to do with two currencies issued by the central bank, the digital real and the physical real, let's say, and eventually to have different prices or values. In what situations would we see physical real or digital real that could have different, that could be different? I find it hard to imagine a situation where this could happen. I find it hard to imagine in what situation the effective deposit in major banks that don't have large probability of going bankrupt till the limit covered by the FGC could have a different quotation, a different value from the passive of the central bank. So really, I don't have. I think this is not. I think this is a non-problem. when I about a monetary conversion, that's totally different. I'm not going into this because that would take us to a totally different terrain than the one we want to discuss today. But as you talked, I began my career studying hyperinflation, so I am passionate for the subject. So digital hyperinflation, that would be interesting. I like this, but this has nothing to do with what we want to say. So let's move forward. So thank you, Marcio. I thought I was be here just as a moderator, but the question to the central bank popped up, so let me begin opening for questions from the audience, and I already tried to address a first question to the central bank. A question from Alex Ribeiro. He's asking how would a custodian model for the financial market would work. People would have a currency registered in the central bank. This would be a risk of the financial institution, or people would assume the risk. Between amongst the directives the central bank had in the digital real, the first one is that it would be issued by the central bank, and second, this emission wouldn't happen straight away by the public, but would be intermediated or would have the custody of financial institutions or institutions part of the payment system. That means in the end of the day, the trade relationship, being able to identify the client face to face, this direct relationship with the final customer would remain with the central bank. It would remain more with the financial institution or the payment institution.
Notwithstanding, this would be a role of the custody system, and the last right of the citizen is also a part of the right of the central bank, a duty of the central bank, which is the last emitter of this currency that was designed in this option and that was directed by the central bank, but there is no direct relationship with the central bank. It is intermediated by the different custodies and financial institutions that would be integrating the Brazilian system. So this model is what we already have in Brazil, and these possibilities. There are differences, and in a certain point extent it's very similar to a model that we have since 2013 in the local legislation with the emission of the digital currency. And when we have the possession of this resource and the final user, this resource is for the final user, although we don't have all of the data and we don't see this data in the central bank. What the legislation has created is the obligation of all of the different institutions, whenever they emit the digital currency, they go to the same resource of currency as it would be physical. So with this proof, we can have a corresponding area in the central bank as well. So this singularity shows that all of the different literatures that talk about the CBDC, and different parts of the literature, there is this model that we call in Brazil, and different areas like peaks in our case. This model is an electronic model mixed with the system of transference that we have. It's a synthetic transfer, but it happens. But once again, going back to the guidelines that were emitted by the central bank and the potential map that we have, what we see here is that the emission is done by the central bank, and it's a risk from the central bank, but this distribution is intermediated by the custodies in the different financial institutions of payment. Now I'm going to aggregate two questions that we have received here from the audience by Alex himself and Thiago Merli. And now I would like to open to all the speakers, and we can follow the order that we have been following since the beginning with Márcio in the end. They go in the same sense that Márcio has raised in the end. Starting with Alex's question, and then I'm going to ask him to elaborate a little bit more. He says, Bruno, you had really talked about the development of new products, but what he's saying is the following. Once again, we're going to open to everyone, and these different areas that has been tackled by Bruno and Márcio. There was this potential of having these different services, these different areas, and to which extent this is a need. There is a need of these new services and products depending on what we already have. We already Pix and the different transfers and different things that we have, and we can adequate that in different areas. How do you see this smartphones and the creation of new products and technologies, the possibilities that you can have, for example, the liquidation of different assets, financial assets? Is it possible to do that based on the infrastructure and the regulation that we currently have, the different deposits and collection that we are having now? Or is it important for us to do it in a different way, creating a new product, maybe entering this new aspect and this new form that is more evoluted or not? Can it be done with the same efficiency and agility in a centralized way or a decentralized way? Why not develop, like Bruno said, peaks or a new product, just like Thiago has mentioned? I particularly agree with him. Until what point this can be related to CDBS? So I reached the conclusion that indeed it's not enough to only have Pix. It's important to have a new product. This new product could incorporate what I already have today, like Márcio has said. Okay, there are two layers: the infrastructure layer and this availability that is provided to the client. Is it desirable to have a new structure? Can this infrastructure run with the new banking system or the old banking system? So I would like to know your perception. What is it important for us to change to be able to embark all of these different products that Bruno has mentioned? Can I do it with infrastructure that is already in place, or should I adapt to new products and new ways of thinking? Can we start with you, Leandro? You are on mute. Sorry. Yes, thank you very much, Rogério. First of all, yes, obviously, if we're talking about a product that is proposed to have the same functionalities of Pix, I agree with Alex and Thiago, and I don't see why a person, for example, I don't know why I, as a person that belong to a financial system or a financial or a bank, why would I buy a digital real, for example? I don't see any advantage in this. But on the other side, if it's disseminated and used in a marketplace in a different way, I think it brings some worries of liquidity, like we said before in the central bank. The currency is emitted by the central bank, and the custody of it is in the private sector, in the financial sector, and the equivalent of that resources is collected in the central bank. If it's scaled, I see a shortage, a shrinkage of the liquidity. So, what would have happened, for example, in the crisis of 2011 and the crisis of 2008 and the liquidity crisis that we had those moments with the Congo War and the different wars that we had, and recently with the pandemic? What would have happened if we had the digital currency already happening, taking place at this moment? I think that it deserves an exercise, a lot of care for us to introduce an asset in a high volume inside an economy that is so big, such Brazil. And I'm going to provide you the process that we have gone through through the pandemic. Brazil has been doing really well if compared with other geographies in the world. We didn't have any liquidity crisis. The banking system with new concessions of credit has been able to provide more than 7.3 trillion reais, and the digital assets have grown as well. And the different federal government products, there was 160 billion reais, and additionally to that, 330 billions of reais was to fund new companies. The financial sector has had a lot of appetite to deliver liquidity to an economy that needed resources, for example, to recover and to face the crisis. I think that in general, we have been doing really well. If we had the Brazilian currency at the digital currency at that moment, I think that we would have a liquidity problem. The part of the assets that would be going to a lower risk type of problem, and the other ones that would be different. So I am very addicted to celerity, and I think Brazil is not different than any other sector. It's not different from the agriculture or the different industries. I think we can gain a lot of efficiency, and I think that the digital real can be applied, especially with some intelligent and tokenization of assets and the guarantees of better debts and guarantee of borrowings of the central bank, for example. And the different sectors have really made a lot of effort, but it's very difficult to do home equity, and that in other jurisdictions is a very important tool to finance to fund the different financial assumptions. And in Brazil, unfortunately, we have several initiatives, but we are not able to do it yet. We have it in a federal level and a private level. Effectively, we have not been able to launch this. The digital real with a smart contract and a tokenization of an asset could eventually solve some problems. Going to the exchange market, export, import, and attaching these different assets with the different areas. Unfortunately, now, Rogério, we have a vision that needs to be really pragmatic about what problem we want to solve, and obviously, we cannot fall in the trap, because in the financial sector we fall in this trap all the time, creating products that are not going to attend many people. They're going to attend 0.0001% of the population. We need to have a product that is scalable and that has a volume that justifies this type of investment. Thank you very much, Leandro. I really like your points. Now, Bruno, do you want to share your vision? I think this was an excellent question. I don't have all of the technical knowledge to respond about if we could do smart contracts or do the tokenization of the different functions that were mentioned here with the current structure that we have. I think that the minimum would be to have a BLT or a blockchain or a decentralized type of system to allow the contracts and the smart contracts to happen in an automatized manner, in immediate manner. I think this is the central functionality that you need to put inside the transaction, the different transactions guarantees that are necessary, being payment or immediate uh, funding. So I think that the great innovation is going to come from this set of functionalities. I think that we wouldn't be able to do that with the current model and of digital currency that we have now to develop this. But more than that, when we go back to the 90s, the 80s, and try to look and guess what at that time would be the innovations that the internet or the digital technology would bring to the market nowadays in 2021, it was impossible. Nobody could predict that. Maybe there was a vision that was concrete, but part of the innovation process is associated to the fact that you cannot effectively predict what are the solutions that are going to be created in the future. But if there's something that we can learn with the internet evolution is that when you work with infrastructures that are interoperable and open and that can allow an innovation in a very centralized manner, this is the recipe for us to continue seeing innovation in the future.
So nowadays we can't know which would be the largest companies in the world in 20 years time, or which would be the major technologies which will bring a revolution to the market in 20 years time. But anyhow, if we assure interoperability in the future, and there's a concept an American professor uses which is generative, we assure that this innovation will keep on happening. A past discussion in the beginning of the internet was on the openness of the protocols, if there should be a control of the basic protocols of operation in the internet, and they ended up deciding turning the protocols interoperable and leaving them open, and this allowed the creation of the tech companies that exist nowadays. Of course, we here don't have an exact parallel, but when we have some of these discussions on should we create an open and interoperable infrastructure so the digital real can better communicate with some innovations that we see in the decentralized finance nowadays? My answer is yes. I think that, of course, we shouldn't have a problem seeking for a solution, and on the other hand, the contrary, you have to have solutions for the problems that exist. But the solution with the digital real is something, well, we've been seeing these things happening in the digital world and in decentralized finance. And more than that, we see that many consumers, many people are using these innovation and are more and more using cryptoactive products. I think that the central bank has an opportunity here of assuring the future of innovation for the financial system that can benefit not only the companies that are already existing today that will continue to invest in innovative technologies and additional sources of revenue for them, but also for the consumers that have been seeking these innovations in these different products. Thank you, Bruno. Márcio, from your side, your views, please. First, I'd like to talk about what Leandro had referred to as a possibility of having liquidity crises eventually caused by CBDC. So in these crises that struck the Brazilian market, the crisis, things he quoted, what do you see normally? You see people say, hey, if I have this money in small banks, I'll retrieve it and place it somewhere else. Where? In a large bank or in a governmental institution. So this happened many times, including in the beginning of the pandemic. And then central bank has to step in, push liquidity into these banks, etc., etc. So we won't go much into this, but then you retrieve the money you have in all kinds of applications, CDB or whatever, not only effective deposits, even because small banks don't have too much effective deposits. The ones who have these are large banks, Banco do Brasil, Caixa, Bradesco, Santander, these banks that have many cash deposits. So if we had a migration in a crisis that everyone decided to remove their cash deposits from the banks and throw them into CBDC, you could create a problem of liquidity for the large banks. That's exactly the opposite, because normally people remove their money from small banks and place it in big banks, and the central bank would have more work dealing with this. This is a theory. It can be or can not be, but if you end cash deposits to begin with, which I suggested, not suggested, but some theoretical thinkers suggested, where you have a compartmentalized thing, well, this won't happen. This is just an idea. Let's move to another question on the possibility brought by CBDC as smart contracts and other innovations. I think it's fascinating although I don't understand much from this, but last month I sold a used car, and to sell a used car you have to go to the registry and have a signature recognition, or have your signature certified, and the ones who don't have this, they will have a huge work. So I think there are many steps that seem to me have to happen before we are able to take profit of this, and I think it's pretty interesting. And I'd like to bring another issue there, innovation. For instance, Pix. Pix is excellent, brought many people, etc., and so on. What's the main feature from Pix? Finality, of course. Nice, it's instantaneous. What's being contested now? Finality, why? There began an industry of people being kidnapped, and they take your phones that allowed interoperability, and they take it, open an app if you have in your cell phones, and steals all your wealth, everything you have in life. And thanks to Pix, they are able to transfer this on as you are kidnapped. Beautiful. Who could think that such a good innovation as Pix would generate something like this? And what is being done? At least I've been reading. Maybe we can see in what situations this would be returned or given back. So what I mean is that sometimes something that in principle is very good, when you put into practice, can be contested, can be opposed. Before this you had assurances, and now this will need judicialization. So as I said, I don't understand much, but we need to go slow with these things, especially in a country like Brazil, where these things are so evolved as in other jurisdictions. I think this assurance issue, innovation, I think this is what the central bank has to keep on doing, to be doing and keep on doing. The part of provide accountability of its passive to people doesn't seem to be something essential. Thank you, Mars. Well, guys, I think we ended up going over time a little bit. From my part, I think it was very profitable. I liked your participation very much. I'd like to thank you very much for participating and the collaboration of the three of you who brought your perspectives, which were different from each other. So I'd like to open for final words before closing. So Leandro, please, you have the floor. Rogério, thank you once again. I'd like to thank for the presence. It's an honor to have been invited, and CBDC innovation is something that's part of the routine in the banks. Annually, we have been investing last year 25 billion reais of investment in technology. This year, the number, if not larger, will repeat itself. So technology is part of the financial business, of banking business, and what took Brazil nowadays to have one of the most modern financial systems in the world. I have no doubt, coming from an organization which was global and present in Brazil, Brazil was what we had of most modern in banking technology. So we have the responsibility of keeping this position. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leandro. Bruno? Rogério, once again, I'd like to thank for the Central Bank for the invitation, thank Leandro and Márcio for the talk. It was wonderful. It was great to talk about this subject, very stimulating. And anyhow, I also would like to say that we will keep on following, as said, the unfolding of the possibilities of CBDC. We are absolutely at your disposal to keep on helping. I think we still have really many uncertainties, as in a general manner, when we look towards a development and appearance of new technologies, but I think it's a very important initiative from the central bank to take what Leandro mentioned a little bit. The financial system has a quality and advancement that's known worldwide. I think the fact that the central bank is leading this discussion only reinforces this position that the central bank always adopted for innovation, of assurance, of stability, and work advanced functioning of the financial system. Thank you all once again. Thank you, Bruno. Márcio, your final considerations, please. I'd like to congratulate the central bank, directory, technical body for this excellent work, not only in thinking that what we need, but also putting this into practice, which is more difficult, like the huge success of PIX demonstrates. I think that as lessons learned, we could say that these innovations, so they need this centralized role of the central bank to happen, is to assure that the innovation can be done, as Bruno mentioned, so they can be interoperable. I think this is the central issue, but that we are doing pretty well, and we also need to be a little careful. It's not because everyone talks about CBDC that we who have PIX already need necessarily to introduce it. So I think we have to weigh very well the pros and the cons, because large technological innovations as the one we are having bring consequences that often we didn't expect, like this kidnapping industry that showed up, right? So I want to once again thank you, because above all, because I had to look into the matter, and I learned something, and now I learned much more, and I want to keep on learning, because this is what will guide the steps towards the future. Thank you very much. Thank you, three, on behalf of the Central Bank and on my name personally. I thank you very much. It was very interesting. Would be nice to carry on, but we have to close because of time. So we reached the end of the 5th webinar on Digital Real. I thank you all, guests and the people who watch us over the internet, and you for your perceptions. I think it was very complimentary to what we think. I think we will keep on with the discussion in other themes. Next webinar will deal with international integration and will happen on November 11th. Central Bank will still broadcast through its social networks, and you follow us over there. Thank you all. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Good afternoon.